Today's story is about a guy who spent 29 years being the reliable one. Always showed up, answered every call, drove across town, no questions asked. Then he ends up in a hospital bed, broken leg, 3 cracked ribs, collapsed lung. And not one person from his family walks through the door. 3 weeks. 0 visits. And when they finally do reach out, they want him to cover $60,000 of debt. What he says at that dinner table, calmly, no yelling, no drama, is exactly why this story is on the channel. Let's get into it. After my accident, a nurse held my hand. Because no one else came. 3 weeks in the hospital. 0 visits. When I got home, Mom said you should have called us. I simply said, I did. 14 times. She went quiet. My name's Alex. I'm 29. I'm from a mid-sized town in Ohio. And for most of my life, I was the invisible middle child. The kind of person who keeps everything running and gets thanked for none of it. I'm the middle of 3. Older sister Jolene is 32. Younger brother Shepard is 25. Growing up, the house looked perfectly fine from the outside. Dad worked in insurance. Mom was a receptionist at a dental office. We had one of those houses with a wraparound porch that neighbors always complimented when they drove past. Inside that house, though, there was this invisible scoreboard I could never quite figure out the rules to. And somehow, no matter what I did, I was always a few points behind. Jolene was the responsible one. College applications done 6 months early. 5-year plan before she could legally rent a car. Mom adored her for it in a way that was completely obvious and completely unspoken at the same time. They had this bond I could see but never touch, like watching people laugh at an inside joke you were never told. Shepard, the baby, operated under some kind of permanent exception. He once crashed Mom's car into a mailbox at 17, and by the end of the week the story had been quietly rewritten so that the mailbox was in a bad spot. That's just how it worked for him. He'd show up late to every family dinner, forget birthdays, bail on plans, and everyone would just shrug. That's just Shep being Shep. And then there was me, the one who helped Mom move furniture every time she redecorated, which was a lot. The one who drove 45 minutes to pick Shepard up when his concert ride bailed on him. The one who sat in the garage with Dad listening to him talk about fantasy football I could not care less about, because he seemed lonely, and I figured somebody should be there. I wasn't the star of the family. I was the utility player. Reliable, available, completely taken for granted. I'm not saying my parents were bad people. I don't think they ever sat around a table and planned any of it. It was more subtle, 1,000 small moments where I just wasn't the priority. Jolene had her first dance recital, and Mom was in the front row with a camcorder. I had my first baseball game, and Dad forgot to come because he was helping Shepard with a school project. Jolene graduated, and they threw a real party. I graduated, and we went to Applebee's. You notice the difference. You pretend you don't, but you do. I moved out at 22, got a job doing project coordination for a property operations firm about an hour from home. Nothing glamorous, but I was good at it, keeping things organized, managing timelines, making sure nothing slipped through the cracks. Which is pretty ironic given how many cracks I'd spent my whole life quietly falling through. I got myself a 1-bedroom apartment with a balcony that overlooked a parking lot. Sounds depressing. I put some plants out there, got a routine going, work, gym, cook dinner, call Mom once or twice a week, drive home for Sunday dinners when I could manage it. And here's the thing about those phone calls and those Sunday dinners. I was always the one initiating, every single time. Mom would chat when I called, but she never called me first. Not once in 7 years of living on my own. I'd show up on Sundays, and they'd spend the whole meal asking Jolene about her promotion, or asking Shepard about whatever hobby he'd picked up that month, which rotated every 3 months like a streaming subscription he kept forgetting to cancel. And I'd sit there eating pot roast, wondering if anyone would notice if I just stopped coming. I tested that theory once. Skipped 2 Sundays. Nobody called, nobody texted. When I showed up the 3rd week, Mom said, "Oh, we missed you last week." Like I'd only been gone once. That stung. But I kept showing up because that was my role. Reliable Alex. The furniture nobody thinks about until they need somewhere to sit. The accident happened on a Tuesday. I remember that specifically because I'd been joking with my coworker Deacon that morning about how Tuesdays are the most nothing day of the week. Mondays are terrible. Wednesdays are hump day. But Tuesdays just exist. That particular Tuesday had other plans. I was driving home from a job site, about 30 minutes outside the city. Cold, late October rain. The kind that makes everything gray and slow and miserable. Two-lane highway, doing around 50, when a pickup truck coming the other direction hydroplaned across the center line. I saw the headlights swing toward me and had this completely useless thought of, this isn't happening, which was wrong in a very obvious and immediate way. The impact was on my driver's side, almost head-on but at an angle, which is probably the reason I'm alive. My car spun, hit the guardrail, and after that I don't remember anything until I woke up in a hospital bed 2 days later. A woman in the car behind me had called 911 and stayed with me until the paramedics arrived. I never got her name. Wherever she is, she's a better human being than most of the people who share my last name. I woke up in the ICU with a broken left femur, 3 cracked ribs, a punctured lung they'd already treated, a concussion, and a shattered left wrist. The first face I saw when I opened my eyes wasn't my mom's. It wasn't my dad's. It was a nurse named Cordelia, who had apparently been checking on me every hour and was the one who noticed when I started coming around. She smiled at me and said, "Welcome back, Alex. You gave us quite a scare." And then she held my hand while she explained what had happened and what they'd done to fix it. She held my hand, a stranger, because nobody else was there to do it. I lay there, groggy and broken, looking past her at the empty chairs along the wall. And I thought, where is everyone? I was about to find out. Hold on. For the listeners, this is me, the host, not Alex. I need a second because I want us to actually sit with this. This man woke up in an ICU, lung punctured, femur snapped, wrist shattered, unconscious for 2 days. And the first human contact he got was from someone whose job it was to be there. Not his mom, not his dad, not his brother, who, as we'll see, communicates primarily through memes. A nurse, a stranger. Hold on to that image of those empty chairs. We're coming back to it. The first thing I did when I was coherent enough to use a phone was ask Cordelia to hand me mine. Cracked screen, but it had survived the crash in my jacket pocket, which felt like some kind of cosmic joke. My body held together with surgical pins, and my phone in basically the same shape. I called Mom first. 5 rings, voicemail. I left a message. "Hey Mom, it's Alex. I was in a car accident. I'm at Riverside General. It's pretty bad. Can you guys come?" I waited an hour, nothing. Called again, voicemail again. Left a shorter message. "Mom, it's me. I'm in the hospital. Please call me back." Over the next 3 days, I called 14 times. I know the exact number because at some point it stopped being about reaching them and started being about documenting something I wasn't ready to name yet. 8 calls to Mom, 3 to Dad, 2 to Jolene, 1 to Shepard, because honestly, I already knew Shepard wasn't going to answer, and I was right. Out of 14 calls, I got exactly 1 response. A text from Jolene on day 3. "Hey, sorry, been swamped. Hope you're feeling better." A thumbs up emoji. I had a chest tube and she sent me a thumbs up. I found out later that Mom had told the family I'd been in a fender bender and was being dramatic about it. I have no idea how she reached that conclusion. My voicemails were pretty clear. But somewhere between hearing Alex is in the hospital and deciding what that meant, my mother chose to believe it probably wasn't serious. Because if it were serious, she'd have to do something about it. And doing something about it would mean disrupting her routine. Meanwhile, I was in the hospital learning how to breathe without feeling like someone was driving a hot poker into my chest every time my lungs expanded. My femur had been surgically repaired with a rod and screws. I'd need months of rehab. My wrist was in a cast and there was still a chance I'd need a second surgery on it. I couldn't walk. I couldn't feed myself properly because my dominant hand was the one in the cast. I was dependent on nurses for everything. And if you've never had to ask a stranger to help you do things you've been doing on your own since you were 5 years old, you can count yourself genuinely lucky. Cordelia became my lifeline in there. She worked day shift 4 days a week, and on those days, she'd check on me more than she had to. Sometimes bring me an extra pudding cup from the cafeteria. One afternoon, she asked if I wanted her to call anyone for me. I told her I'd been calling. They knew. She got this look on her face, the kind where someone is angry on your behalf but trying not to show it. She squeezed my shoulder and said, "Well, you've got me. I'm not going anywhere." There was also a rehab specialist named Aaron. Big guy, former college linebacker. Gentlest hands you've ever seen. He started working with me about a week in. First time sitting up, then standing. Then 3 steps with a walker. Every tiny milestone he'd celebrate like I'd just done something incredible. "Come on, Alex, one more." I'd be sweating and shaking and trying not to cry, and this man I barely knew was cheering harder for me than my family ever had. Day 10, I called Mom one more time. She picked up. Alex, hi honey, what's going on? I told her I'd been in the hospital for 10 days, that I'd called 14 times. She said she didn't think that was right, that she'd gotten one message saying I had a little accident and figured I was fine. I was always fine. I told her I broke my leg, cracked 3 ribs, my lung collapsed, I'd had surgery. Pause. Then, well, why didn't you have the hospital call us? I sat there with the phone against my ear and felt something shift inside me. Not break, shift, like a bone that had been out of place my whole life, clicking into position. Because in that moment I understood she wasn't coming. Even hearing exactly how bad it was, her instinct wasn't, I'm on my way. It was, why didn't you try harder? The burden was still on me, flat on my back in a hospital bed. Still my job to make it easy for them. I said, I called you 14 times, Mom. That's all I've got for you. And I hung up. She didn't call back. Day 14, 2 full weeks in. I had exactly 0 visitors from my family. But I want to tell you who did come. Deacon from work came by twice. My neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, a 70-year-old woman, took a cab to the hospital with a tin of cookies and sat with me for 2 hours telling me stories about her late husband. My buddy Riggins, who I see once a month for poker, drove an hour and a half to bring me a stack of paperback novels and a card that said, "You're too stubborn to die. I respect that." These people came. These people showed up. The same people I'd moved furniture for, made drives for, they came. The family I'd done all that for couldn't manage one trip. Day 16, Shepard texted. Yo, I heard you got banged up. That sucks, bro. Want me to send you some memes? I stared at that text for a full 5 minutes. Then I turned my phone face down on the bed and asked Cordelia if there was any more of that butterscotch pudding. Day 18, Jolene called. Not to ask how I was, but to ask if I could make it to her daughter's birthday party the following weekend. Waverly was turning 4, and the entertainment had canceled. I told her I was still in the hospital and wouldn't be discharged for at least a few more days. She sighed like I was inconveniencing her. Mom said you were mostly fine. I figured you'd be out by now. Jolene, I've been here for almost 3 weeks. I had surgery. I'm learning to walk again. Oh, well, I hope you feel better. Let me know about the party, though, okay? I hung up and looked out the window at the parking lot below, gray and wet, because October in Ohio is basically just different shades of gray, and thought about every Sunday dinner I'd driven to, every call that was never returned, every time I'd shown up, and how the one time I needed them to, I got voicemails and thumbs up emojis and a meme offer. Wait. Host jumping in, not the OP. I need to point something out here because it's too important to blow past. 3 people showed up for this man in that hospital. A poker buddy, a 70-year-old neighbor, and a coworker. Not one person who shared his last name. Riggins drove 90 minutes. Mrs. Calloway took a cab. Deacon came twice. Meanwhile, Alex's actual family, the people he'd rearranged his schedule for dozens of times, sent a thumbs up and a meme offer. That's the roster. That's the whole lineup. A tin of cookies from Mrs. Calloway completely outperformed the entire bloodline. Honestly, Mrs. Calloway is the MVP of this story, and she wasn't even trying. Cordelia found me crying that night. Not loud, just quiet tears I couldn't stop. She sat on the edge of my bed and didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, Alex, you deserve people who show up for you. I know that's hard to hear right now, but the fact that they didn't, that's not a reflection of your worth. That's a reflection of theirs. I nodded. I couldn't talk right then, but I heard her. And something that had shifted during that phone call with Mom settled into place permanently. I was done being the person who showed up for people who would never do the same. I got discharged on day 21. Cordelia hugged me carefully on the way out, ribs still tender, and slipped me a piece of paper with her number. Call me if you need anything. Not your family. Me. Aaron shook my hand and told me if I slacked an outpatient, he'd come find me. I believed him. Riggins picked me up. He'd offered before I even had to ask. That's the thing about real people. They don't make you beg. Beat up Jeep, helped me in with the walker, didn't ask a bunch of questions or try to get me talking about my feelings. Just put on music and drove. When we pulled up to my place, he said, "Stocked your fridge." Eggs, bread, that soup you like, you won't starve. I almost lost it in the passenger seat. This guy I saw once a month had thought ahead about what I'd need when I got home. My mother hadn't. Pause. Host, not Alex. I want to slow down on this for a second. Riggins stocked the fridge. He thought ahead, problem solved without being asked. That's what real support looks like. Not grand gestures. Just someone thinking, what does he actually need when he gets home? And doing that thing. Meanwhile, Alex's mother couldn't answer the phone 14 times. Not over 14 months, 14 times in 3 days, while her son was in the ICU. Keep that number in your head. 14. Back to Alex. The first week home was rough. Getting around with a walker, showering was a 45-minute ordeal. Cooking with one hand in a cast was basically impossible. I lived on microwavable meals. I had a home health aide named Roslyn who came 3 times a week, all business, but in a comforting way. She'd help me with exercises, check my incisions, make sure I wasn't overdoing it. Every time she left, the apartment felt too big and too quiet. For 5 full days after I got home, my family didn't call. 5 days. Following a major car accident, not a single word. On day 6, Mom called, not to ask how I was settling in, not to apologize. She called because Thanksgiving was coming up and wanted to know what dish I was bringing. Just like that, like nothing had happened. I told her I wasn't coming. She asked what I meant. I said I could barely walk, couldn't drive, and didn't feel like sitting at a table with people who couldn't visit me in the hospital. Then she did the guilt pivot. You know how busy everyone's been. Jolene has Waverly in the new house. Your father's been dealing with his back. Shepard's going through some things. We all have lives. I told her I'd expected one person to come. One. In 3 weeks. She said she hoped I'd change my mind, that it wouldn't be the same without me, which was interesting, given that 3 weeks without me in a hospital had apparently been just fine. I hung up. And sitting there in my apartment, Walker beside me, wrist in a cast, I made a decision. I was done waiting for my family to show up. I was going to build a life where their absence wasn't the loudest thing in the room. I threw myself into rehab. Aaron pushed me hard in outpatient sessions, and I pushed back just as hard. 6 weeks out, I was off the walker and onto a cane. 3 months out, walking on my own. Slow, with a limp the doctor said would improve over time. My wrist healed without the second surgery, which was the first genuine good luck I'd had in months. My boss Sullivan kept my position open the whole time. He set me up on light duty when I was ready. Scheduling, coordination, planning from a desk. And said, Alex, you're one of the best coordinators I've got. The job will be here. You just get better. He actually meant it. I stopped calling home, stopped texting, stopped driving to Sunday dinners nobody had invited me to anyway. And I filled that space with people who actually showed up. Riggins and I hung out more. Deacon and his wife Sloan had me over for dinner once a week. Mrs. Calloway became a kind of surrogate grandmother, always showing up with food and telling me I was too thin. And then there was Cordelia. She texted a couple weeks after I got home, just checking in. We started talking, not romantic at first, just 2 people who'd gone through something intense together and found out they actually liked each other outside of it. She was sharp and funny, and had this way of calling me out when I was being too hard on myself. You're not a burden. You're a person who needed help. Stop mixing those 2 things up. About 2 months in, we went on a real first date. Little Italian place where the owner knew her by name. She ordered for both of us because she said I had terrible taste in pasta shapes, which was insulting and accurate. I'm a penny guy. She's a rigatoni loyalist. We made it work. 5 months of silence from my family. Then one afternoon, Mom called. Her voice sounded different, smaller somehow. Less like the woman who'd told me I couldn't expect everyone to drop everything, more like someone who needed something. I recognized the tone immediately, the asking voice. The one she used when she wanted a favor, but needed to frame it like a privilege. She said there was a family dinner on Sunday, that she and Dad had things they needed to discuss with everyone, and she'd really love it if I could be there. I asked what things. She got vague. Just family stuff. Financial things, planning things. Better to talk in person. Part of me wanted to say no, but I'd thought about it enough to know I didn't want to walk in with anger or with hope. I wanted to see who I was in that room now. So I told her I'd think about it and hung up. That night, I told Cordelia about the call. She looked at me and said, "What do you want to do? Not what should you do. What do you want?" I said I wanted to go. Not because I missed them, because I wanted to see who I was in that room now. She nodded. "Then go. If it's terrible, I'll have takeout waiting." Before Sunday, I went through my phone records. Not obsessively, just factually. 2 years of contact history. In that time, I had initiated contact with my mother over 200 times. She had initiated contact with me 11 times. 8 were about scheduling family events. The other 3 were to ask me for something. 200 to 11. That's not a relationship. That's a customer service line with one loyal caller. Hold on, time out. Post here, 200 to 11. I need you to sit with that number for a second because it's doing a lot of work. That's not a communication gap. That is a one-way street with a toll booth. And of the 11 times she did reach out, 8 were about scheduling family events. 3 were requests. 0 were just to see how he was doing. 0. In 2 full years. So when she calls out of nowhere after 5 months of radio silence asking him to a family dinner to discuss financial things? Yeah. This is not a pot roast situation. This is a pitch meeting. And he's about to find out exactly what's on the table. Sunday came. Riggins offered to be on standby, which he was calling Operation Save Alex from Emotional Garbage. Having a friend like that is worth more than any amount of family obligation. I drove myself to my parents' house for the first time in 5 months. The drive felt longer than I remembered, or maybe I was just more aware of the distance. I rang the doorbell of the house I grew up in, which felt strange but right. I wasn't walking in anymore. Mom opened the door with an exaggerated gasp. "Come in, come in." She hugged me, and it felt like putting on a coat that doesn't fit. Too tight in some places, too loose in others. Dad gave me a nod and a, "Hey, son," like I'd just come in from getting the mail. Jolene said, "Hey, you look good," in a tone that seemed a little surprised I didn't look worse. Shepard said, "What's up?" without looking up from his phone. Nobody mentioned the accident. Nobody mentioned the hospital. Nobody mentioned the 5 months of silence. I had stepped through a portal back to the old dynamic, and apparently we were all just going to pretend. We sat down for dinner. Pot roast, same as always. Small talk for a while, Jolene's new house, Shepard's new job in sales that he described in a way that made it sound like even he wasn't sure what he did. Something about accounts, I think, maybe territories, genuinely unclear. Dad's back, Mom's co-worker drama. Nobody asked me a single question about my life. Not one question in the whole meal. Then, halfway through, Dad cleared his throat. That was the signal. He explained that he and Mom had been thinking about the house. Downsizing, maybe a condo, something smaller and easier to maintain. But here was the thing. There was some debt they hadn't told us about. Credit cards, a second mortgage from a few years back, some medical bills from Dad's back treatments. Total was around $60,000. The room went quiet. Then Mom jumped in. She said they'd been thinking about how to handle it as a family. And since Jolene had just bought her new house and Shepard was still getting established, they were hoping I could help cover the bulk of it. Let me repeat that. My parents, who didn't visit me in the hospital, who didn't call back, who weren't there when I was learning to walk again, were now sitting across from me asking me to handle $60,000 of debt. Because my siblings were busy spending money on other things. Okay, pause. The audacity here is genuinely breathtaking. These people watched Alex initiate every phone call, every visit, every favor for years. And when he was in a hospital bed for 3 weeks with a collapsed lung and a surgical rod in his leg, they sent a thumbs-up emoji and a meme offer. Now, 5 months later, they're asking him to be the family bank? That's not a family dinner. That's a GoFundMe pitch with pot roast. And the reasoning, he doesn't have a mortgage, he doesn't have kids, so he should pay, is so backwards, I need you to hear what he says next. Because this is where it gets good. I looked at Mom. She had that look. The expectant one. Of course you'll do this. You're Alex. You always help. You never say no. Dad was studying his plate like the pot roast had suddenly gotten fascinating. Jolene was watching me with that quiet assumption in her eyes. Shepard was still on his phone. I put my fork down, very calmly. Why me? Mom blinked. What do you mean? Why am I the one being asked to cover the bulk of this? Well, you don't have a mortgage. You don't have kids. You're the most financially stable of the three right now. So because I've been responsible with my money, I should pay for your debt. It's not like that, Alex. It's family. We help each other. I let that sentence hang in the air for a moment. Just let everybody sit with it. Then I said, do we? Because I was in the hospital for 3 weeks, Mom. 3 weeks. And not a single person at this table came to see me. Not one. So I'm a little curious about this we help each other thing, because it seems like it's only ever gone in one direction. The silence was something else. Jolene put her fork down. Dad looked up from his plate. Even Shepard glanced up from his phone. Mom went quiet the way she always did when she couldn't spin something. Then she broke. Alex, that's not fair. Everyone was busy. You can't hold that over our heads forever. I'm not holding anything over anyone's head. I'm stating a fact. I called 14 times. Nobody came. And now you're asking me to write a check. I'm just noticing that. Dad tried. Son, we're not asking you to cover all of it. Just help where you can. That's what family does. I looked at him and said, Dad, I love you. But where was family when I was learning to walk again? Where was family when a nurse had to hold my hand because none of you were there? Where was family when I ate Thanksgiving alone in my apartment because I couldn't drive and nobody offered to pick me up? He didn't have an answer. He rubbed his forehead and looked at Mom like she was supposed to fix it. Then, Jolene leaned forward and said something that almost made me laugh. Alex, I think you're being a little dramatic. You were in the hospital. You weren't dying. People get into car accidents all the time. I turned to her. My lung collapsed. I had a metal rod put in my leg. I was in the ICU for 2 days before I woke up. But sure, I wasn't dying. I was just lying there for 3 weeks wondering why nobody came. Silly me. She sat back. Waverly was playing with a piece of bread, completely unbothered by all of it. Then Shepard put his phone down and decided to contribute. Dude, I texted you. You texted me, yo, that sucks, bro. Want me to send you some memes? He shrugged. What was I supposed to say? Get in your car, drive to the hospital, sit in the chair next to my bed. That's what you were supposed to do. He looked genuinely confused, like I'd explained something in a language he'd never heard. Mom tried one more time, the guilt voice, the one that had worked on me for 29 years. Alex, please, we need your help. If we can't get out from under this, we might lose the house. This is serious. And here's where all those months of sitting with myself actually mattered. Because the old Alex would have folded. Would have said, of course, Mom, let me see what I can do. Then gone home feeling hollow and used and done it all over again. But the old Alex was gone. He'd been left behind in a hospital room with 14 missed calls and an empty chair. I said, Mom, I hope you figure it out. I really do. But I'm not the one who's going to fix this for you. She stared at me, then said the thing that sealed it. You should have called us when the accident happened. If you'd really needed us, you would have made sure we knew. I let that sit for a moment. Then, I called you 14 times. You just didn't answer. She went completely quiet. And for the first time, I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Not guilt exactly, closer to recognition. Like she was seeing the full picture and realizing she couldn't rearrange any of it to make herself look better. I stood up from the table. No slammed chairs, no raised voice. I love you guys. But I'm done being the person who gives everything and gets nothing back. If you want a relationship with me, it has to look different. You have to actually show up. Not just when you need something. All the time. Until that changes, I need some space. I walked out with my slight limp and my steady heart and drove home. Cordelia was waiting with Thai food and the most patient, tell me everything expression I've ever seen on another person. So I told her everything. When I finished, she said, I'm proud of you. Then she said, you know what you just did? You put a chair on the other side of the table and told them to come sit in it. Whether they do is up to them. Final update. That was about 3 months ago. Here's where things stand. Mom called about a week after the dinner. Not to apologize, but to say what I'd said was hurtful, and she didn't appreciate being made to feel like a bad mother. I told her I wasn't trying to make her feel anything. I was telling her what happened. She said she needed time to process. I said take all the time you need. A month later, she called again. This time she was crying. She said she'd been talking to a friend named Gemma, who'd gone through something similar with her own kids and given Mom some hard truths. She said, "I'm sorry, Alex. I should have been there. I don't have a good reason. I just didn't think about it. And I know that's worse than any excuse." I told her I appreciated it, that I loved her, that it was going to take time. She understood. Dad called separately, which he had never done in my life. Said he wasn't good at this stuff, but that he owed me an apology. From a man who communicates mostly through grunts and football takes, it meant something. Jolene sent a long text. Thoughtful, honestly. She said she was ashamed of herself, that she'd told herself I was fine because it was easier than facing the fact that she hadn't been there. She asked if we could have lunch. We did. Awkward at first, but by the end we were laughing about something stupid from childhood, and it felt like a crack in a wall that had been there too long. Shepard texted, "My bad bro," with a fist bump emoji, about what I expected. But he also showed up at my apartment a couple weeks ago with snacks, and asked if I wanted to watch the game. Didn't mention the hospital or the dinner. Just sat on my couch, watched football, made bad jokes about the commentators. For Shepard, that was showing up. His version of it. I'll take it. The debt? They sold the house, paid off what they owed, and moved into a smaller place near Jolene. It wasn't easy, but they did it without my checkbook. As for me, genuinely doing well. Sullivan promoted me to senior project coordinator with a raise that made me double-check the email. My leg is almost back to full, the limp barely there. Cordelia and I just signed a lease on a 2-bedroom with a balcony that overlooks a park instead of a parking lot, which is a better metaphor than I planned. Riggins is our most frequent dinner guest and calls Cordelia the upgrade, which she finds hilarious and I find completely accurate. I still think about those 3 weeks sometimes. The empty room, the 14 calls, the nurse who held my hand when my own mother wouldn't pick up. But it doesn't make me angry anymore. It made me who I am now. Someone who knows his worth, who stopped showing up for people who would never return the favor, and found the ones who would. If you're the person who always gives and never gets, the one who drives across town and never gets a call back, you're allowed to stop. Put down the rope and see who picks up the other end. If nobody does, that tells you everything. Not about you. About them. I called 14 times. I'm done dialing. Look, Alex isn't some perfect guy. He spent 29 years quietly absorbing disrespect and filing it under, "That's just how family is." But the moment that hospital room was empty, the whole thing was right there in one image. And when they showed up 5 months later asking for $60,000, he didn't yell, didn't storm out, didn't beg anyone to understand him. He just asked one question. Do we? And let the silence do the rest. That's not drama. That's clarity. Drop a comment. What would you have done at that dinner table? And if you're not subscribed yet, you already know what to do. Hit the button.